Hello and welcome to a brand new series that we're going to do here at the Shippensburg History Center, home of the Shippensburg Historical Society. My name is John Miller. I'm the executive director here at this facility, and over the course of my 20-year career, I've come in contact with many great authors. I've also helped authors with their research, and I've also had people come up to me and ask me if they were going to get into a certain subject, what would be a good starting point for that? Because sometimes the primary resources out there, either they're limited or sometimes they can be a little hard to read depending upon the era. So to kind of kick off this new series, I wanted to go ahead and talk about one of my favorite books, and that is The British Defeat of the French in Pennsylvania in 1758. This is a military history of the Forbes Expedition against Fort Duquesne. It was written by Douglas Culbertson, and it was published in 2010 by McFarland and Company out of North Carolina. This book here is the only book that I know that's dedicated to the Forbes Expedition of 1758. In 1755, after Braddock's army was pretty much decimated at a place called the Monongahela, the war here in North America, known as the French and Indian War, was not going so well for England, and a new strategy was needed. And because of that, in 1757, England offers a promotion to Colonel John Forbes to lead an expedition to take out Fort Duquesne, which would be the starting point of the dominoes falling that would eventually oust the French out of North America. This book here is an excellent resource because it talks about places like Philadelphia, Carlisle, Shippensburg, Fort Loudon, Fort Littleton, Raystown, which would be eventually Fort Bedford. It talks about Fort Cumberland. It also talks about Fort Ligonier, as well as the ultimate fall of Fort Duquesne itself. You hear about a lot more focus on the local heroes, such as James Byrd, who was a Shippensburg native. You hear about Colonel Henry Bouquet, John Armstrong, and Hugh Mercer, and people along those lines. But then you get into the teeth of the nationally known people like George Washington, for an example, and they're all in here. And what's really unique about this book here and the history of the Forbes Expedition, Forbes really was not medically able to go ahead and lead from the front this expedition. He was suffering from a form of stomach cancer. So he would go ahead and have Henry Bouquet, who he would basically put second in command of his army, and he needed somebody that he could work with, but at the same time who was not afraid to go ahead and make decisions on their own and carry out orders to the dotted I and the crossed T, for an example. So Bouquet and Forbes' relationship really was bonded and forged from this point here. Another great aspect of this book here is it really gets down into the nook and cranny of the campaign. It talks about the hardships that these troops were facing, from lack of shortages of clothing to other things. And one thing that Forbes was really good at was looking at the Braddock expedition to see what went well for Braddock and what his big mistakes were. And Forbes really concentrated on those mistakes to make sure that they would not be repeated during his expedition. For an example, he made sure that there was enough fortifications within a day's march. He made sure that his military was trained to fight Native American style. That way they would not be stuck fighting just the European style here, and so on and so forth. And because of that, Forbes really took this army and tried to give it everything it needed in order to win the campaign, which it finally did on November 24th, 1758, when the French went ahead and evacuated Fort Duquesne, allowing Forbes himself to occupy the fort the very next day. So the downside to this book here and there's only one. You have to have some basic knowledge of the French and Indian War during this campaign for you to fully understand it. However, if you're somebody who has a good understanding about the French and Indian War, who's looking to learn more about just this campaign, this book here is really good doing that, and it paints a really good picture, as well as showing the relationship of some of those other senior officers that you're going to hear a lot about, like Washington and Forbes' relationship, which was not always that good. You can pick this up on Amazon once in a while. I think the book is actually out of print again. I ended up buying this copy here, I think for like $40 off Amazon. But I tell you what, it is money that is well spent. So if you can find this out there in the wilderness, go ahead and grab it and curl up with a blanket with a nice adult beverage this wintertime, sitting around a nice warm heater. And I tell you, this book here will entertain you from the first page to the very last page. So anyway, I hope you folks enjoyed this series that we're going to call the History Book Corner, and look forward to additional videos coming out about various other topics, whether they be local to Shippensburg or to the Cumberland Valley, or to maybe some of the more nationally known historical events. So until then, everybody, take it easy, and if you guys want to come in and kind of preview this, we got a whole room for you to sit down for an hour or two, and you can read chapter by chapter. Unfortunately, we do not rent books or anything like that out, but you can always come in and preview the book before you decide to buy. Till then, have a good one.